Imagine building your entire life back from ashes, piece by piece, only to have the one man who broke you walk in years later, powerful, untouchable, and unaware that the little girl playing by your side is his own blood. What happens when her innocent voice cuts the silence with a single word? Daddy. This isn't just a love story. It's a story of second chances, hidden scars, and the power of truth that refuses to stay buried. The bell above the cafe door jingled as sunlight spilled across the polished wooden floor. Elena stood behind the counter, towel in hand, wiping down the surface with small, practiced strokes. To anyone else, it was an ordinary day in a small neighborhood cafe. But for Elena, every morning carried a quiet victory. 6 years ago, she'd had nothing but heartbreak and the sound of a door closing behind her. Now she had this cafe, warm, filled with the smell of roasted beans, vanilla, and freshly baked pastries. A place where neighbors came for comfort, where strangers became regulars. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Most importantly, it was Sophie's safe world. "Mommy, look! I made the sun pink today," Sophie said from the corner stool, holding up her crayon-doodled paper. Her cheeks dimpled as she grinned, curls tumbling across her forehead. Elena laughed softly. "Pink sun? That's a first. But you know what? I think it's perfect." Sophie's laughter rang out like bells, unbothered by rules of what color the sun should or shouldn't be. That was how Elena wanted her to live, free, imaginative, untouched by the mistakes of adults. Customers filtered in, filling the cafe with chatter and the comforting clink of mugs. Elena greeted each one warmly, her apron dusted with flour from the morning rush. She looked tired sometimes, her hands rough from work, her back aching from long hours, but there was a quiet strength in her. A strength born of sacrifice. Because behind Sophie's smile, there was a story Elena had guarded like a secret flame. Years ago, she had fallen in love with a man who seemed to hold the world in his palms. Daniel Sterling, even his name carried weight. He had been ambitious, brilliant, magnetic, everything she thought she wanted. They had shared laughter, dreams, promises whispered under city lights. She believed they were building a life together, one brick at a time. But Daniel's dreams had been louder than her voice, bigger than their love. He had always said he wanted to change the world, and when faced with the choice between her and his ambitions, he had chosen the latter. He had walked away, leaving her with a heart shattered in silence. What he never knew was that he had left more than Elena behind. He had left Sophie. Elena remembered those first nights after he left, lying awake, hand pressed against her belly as tears soaked her pillow. The fear of raising a child alone had nearly crushed her. But then Sophie was born, and her tiny cry had been both a battle cry and a lifeline. That little heartbeat had become her reason to fight. Now, 6 years later, Elena had built a small life for the two of them. A fragile but beautiful life stitched together by hard work and unconditional love. And every day she told herself she didn't need Daniel. She didn't need his empire, his money, or even his apologies. She only needed Sophie. The morning carried on as usual, students rushing in for caffeine, old couples lingering over tea, laughter bouncing off the walls. Elena moved among them like clockwork, but with the soft attentiveness of someone who cared. Then, the cafe door opened again. Elena didn't look up at first. She was steaming milk for a cappuccino, her hands steady from years of repetition, but the silence that fell near the door, sharp, sudden, pulled her eyes up, and she froze. Standing there, framed by the doorway as though he had stepped out of her memories, was Daniel Sterling. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The years hadn't dimmed him, they had sharpened him. He was taller, broader, his suit tailored to perfection. His hair, darker now, brushed neatly back, and his jaw carried the weight of authority. He walked with the kind of confidence that bent rooms to his will. And yet to Elena, he was the ghost she had buried long ago. Her hands trembled on the milk jug. She quickly set it down, hoping no one noticed, but inside her heart was pounding like thunder. Memories flooded her, the first time he kissed her, the last time he walked away. Every moment in between came crashing down. Daniel stepped further inside, his eyes scanning the cozy cafe. Something softened in his expression as if the warmth of the space surprised him. He didn't belong here in this little corner of normal life. He belonged to skyscrapers, boardrooms, headlines. Yet here he was. He approached the counter, his footsteps steady, measured. And when he spoke, Elena almost broke. Black coffee. To go. His voice was deeper now, edged with authority but still achingly familiar. She forced her hands to move, pouring the coffee. Don't look at him, she told herself. Don't let him see. But when she slid the cup across the counter, her eyes betrayed her. And he looked up. The world tilted. His eyes, those same piercing eyes she once knew, met hers. For a split second, confusion flickered, followed by recognition. He froze just as she had. Time seemed to collapse, shrinking 6 years into a single breath. Elena? He murmured, disbelief threading his tone. Her lips pressed into a line. She wanted to speak, to tell him to leave, to demand why he was here. But her throat locked, the words trapped under the weight of years unsaid, and then the moment shattered. Mommy, look! Sophie's cheerful voice cut through the silence like a bell. She hopped off her stool, waving her picture proudly as she ran toward Elena. Her curls bounced, her laughter innocent and free. Daniel's eyes followed her instinctively. The little girl stopped when she noticed him. Her wide eyes studied his face, her head tilting curiously. Daniel gave a polite smile, the kind strangers offer children. But Sophie stared harder, as though trying to solve a puzzle her young mind didn't yet understand. Then she spoke. Daddy? The word wasn't a question. It was instinct, pure and startling. The cafe fell silent. Elena's body went rigid, her heart slamming against her ribs. Her hand reached out quickly, resting on Sophie's shoulder, but it was too late. The truth had slipped from her daughter's lips. Daniel's face drained of color. The coffee cup trembled in his grip, nearly slipping from his hand. His eyes darted from Sophie to Elena, back and forth, as though searching for denial, for some explanation that made sense. Elena's throat burned. She wanted to scream, to run, to undo this moment. But all she could do was stand there, frozen, as her carefully built world teetered on the edge of collapse. Sophie blinked up at him again, waiting. Daddy? She repeated softly, and in that instant 6 years of secrets cracked wide open. What would you do if the past you buried came back in the form of wide, innocent eyes calling you by a name you didn't even know belonged to you? Would you walk away again, or would you stay and fight for a chance at redemption? The word hung in the air like shattered glass, sharp and impossible to ignore. Daddy Daniel Sterling. A man used to commanding empires and bending competitors to his will, stood completely undone in the middle of a modest cafe. His grip on the coffee cup trembled, and for once in his life, he had no script, no power, no control, only shock. Elena's chest ached, her pulse deafening in her ears. She crouched beside Sophie quickly, pulling her close, trying to soften the moment. Sweetheart, why don't you finish coloring your pink sun? Mommy will come look in a minute. Sophie frowned, confused by her mother's tight voice, but nodded and skipped back to her stool, humming to herself. Children were resilient that way. For her, life was crayons and laughter, not the tangled mess of adults' choices. When Elena stood again, her eyes met Daniel's. The storm in them was undeniable. Is she... His voice cracked, words failing him. Elena's lips parted, but she said nothing. Years of silence weighed heavily on her shoulders. Finally, she forced the truth past the lump in her throat. She's yours. The coffee cup slipped from his hand, splashing dark liquid across the counter. He didn't even flinch. His eyes, wide and haunted, stayed locked on Elena. Mine? His voice was raw, almost unrecognizable. You're saying she's... Yes! Elena cut him off, her voice sharper than she intended. Her hands clenched the edge of the counter as though it was the only thing keeping her steady. She's your daughter, Daniel. The one you never knew about. The one I raised alone. The air between them thickened with every second of silence. Daniel staggered back, running a hand through his hair, his polished composure cracking. The walls he had built over years of success and ruthless business collapsed under the weight of 6 years of truth. Elena, why didn't you tell me? Her laugh was bitter, shaky. Tell you? When, Daniel? When you were too busy chasing boardrooms and press conferences? When you were climbing higher and higher, stepping on anything or anyone in your way? You left. You made your choice. He flinched as if struck. I thought... His words faltered. He dragged a breath, his voice quieter, almost desperate. I thought I was doing what was best for us. I thought if I built something strong enough, then we'd have everything. I didn't know. His gaze flicked toward Sophie, who was now humming as she carefully glued bits of colored paper onto her drawing. His voice broke. I didn't know I was leaving her behind, too. Elena's eyes stung. She turned away, fighting the wave of emotions clawing at her chest. Anger, hurt, sadness, and something more dangerous. Longing. You didn't ask, she whispered. You didn't stay long enough to find out. Daniel stepped closer, his voice trembling but steady. Elena, let me fix this. Her head snapped up, fury flashing. Fix this? You can't just walk back into our lives like nothing happened. Do you know what it took to raise her? To work nights? To build this place brick by brick so she would never feel the emptiness you left me with? You don't get to claim her now like she's some merger you forgot to sign. He winced, guilt carved deep into his features. You're right. I don't deserve to walk back in, but she deserves to know her father. And His voice cracked. I want to know her, Elena. I want to try. Her chest tightened, the anger tangled with exhaustion. She looked at him, really looked at him. For years she had painted Daniel as the villain in her story, the man who abandoned her for ambition. Yet here he stood, stripped of all the armor of wealth and power, looking utterly lost. But could she trust him? Could Sophie? You don't know her, Elena said finally, her voice softer but edged with steel. You don't know the way she loves bedtime stories, or how she refuses to eat carrots, or how she laughs when it rains. You don't know the songs she sings in her sleep. I raised her. I've been here every single day. Where were you? Daniel swallowed hard. His eyes glistened, a rare vulnerability cracking through. Lost, blind, chasing things that don't matter compared to this. Compared to her. For a moment, silence swallowed the cafe again, broken only by Sophie's cheerful humming. Please, Elena, Daniel whispered. Don't shut me out. Give me a chance to be the man she needs. To be the father I should have been. Elena's heart twisted. Part of her wanted to scream to protect Sophie from the pain she knew too well. Another part, a part she hated, wanted to believe him. Wanted Sophie to have the father she deserved. Sophie's laughter rang out again, and both of them turned to see her proudly holding up her pink sun collage. Mommy, look, I made it brighter! Her innocence cut through the tension like sunlight. Elena's eyes softened. This wasn't about her pain anymore. It was about Sophie. She drew a shaky breath, her decision heavy but necessary. One step at a time, Daniel. If you want to be part of her life, you'll have to prove you won't walk away again. I won't let her heart break the way mine did. Daniel nodded quickly, relief flashing across his features. I will. I'll do whatever it takes. For her. For you. Elena's eyes narrowed at the last words, but she said nothing. She wasn't ready to reopen that wound. Not yet. The cafe slowly returned to its rhythm. Customers came and went, unaware of the storm that had just reshaped 3 lives. Daniel stayed, quietly watching Sophie, his gaze softening with every giggle, every smile. He didn't approach her yet, respecting Elena's unspoken boundary, but the determination in his posture was clear. As the day wound down, Elena walked over to Sophie, who was yawning into her crayons. She scooped her daughter into her arms, pressing a kiss to her hair. Sophie giggled sleepily, wrapping her arms around her mother's neck. Daniel watched, his chest aching with longing and regret. Elena looked at him, tired but resolute. She doesn't know pain, Daniel. I've made sure of it. Don't you dare be the one to change that. I won't, he promised. His voice steady now, a quiet vow etched in the air. And for the first time in years, Elena allowed a flicker of something fragile to surface. Hope. Because maybe, just maybe, people could change. Maybe redemption wasn't a fairy tale. Sophie stirred in her arms, her voice drowsy. "Mommy, Daddy's coming back tomorrow, right?" Elena's eyes widened, her breath catching. Daniel's gaze shot to hers, his heart pounding. In that moment, Elena realized that Sophie had already made her choice. The question now was whether Daniel could rise to it. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "Tomorrow. Don't make her wait." And with that, Elena turned away, carrying Sophie upstairs, her heart torn between fear and faith. Daniel remained standing in the quiet cafe, staring at the empty stool where Sophie had been. His empire, his wealth, his status, none of it mattered anymore. For the first time in his life, he had something worth fighting for. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. Sometimes the people we love will hurt us, and sometimes they'll leave us with scars that seem too deep to heal. But life has a way of forcing us to face the truth. Forgiveness and redemption aren't easy, but they're possible. And if love is brave enough to stay, families can be rebuilt, even from the ashes of heartbreak.